A reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, May 17th. Your reader is Florian Melnick. The weather today is going to be nice with intervals of clouds and sunshine, high 73. Mostly cloudy tonight, low 62. Partly sunny, breezy and warmer tomorrow, high 84. Our first article is from the front page, analysis. Trump's diplomatic style toward Iran seems to hit a wall, by Matt Spetelnik and Humira Pamuk. Reuters. Washington. During his first year back in office, President Trump's blustery negotiating style won him concessions from countries on issues ranging from tariffs to armed conflict. But with Iran, that same brand of coercive diplomacy, marked by public threats, insults, and ultimatums, seems to have hit a wall and may be undermining his own efforts to end a war that has shaken the global economy. With the two sides deadlocked, Trump has signaled growing frustration over the 11-week-old crisis, but has shown little inclination to soften his harsh diplomatic approach toward Iran's leaders. That does not bode well for a quick negotiated settlement, fueling fears that the current standoff and its unprecedented shock to world energy supplies could drag on indefinitely with periodic bouts of brinkmanship. Among the main obstacles, analysts say, is the Iranian ruler's mindset, including their need to save face with their own domestic audience, despite U.S.-Israeli strikes, having killed many top leaders and heavily degraded the Islamic Republic's military capabilities. Though Iran has essentially maintained a chokehold on the vital Strait of Hormuz, Trump has persisted with a diplomatic playbook characterized by maximalist demands, unpredictability, mixed signals, and scathing language. Even more significant, analysts say it is Trump's insistence on emerging from the conflict, framing it as an absolute victory for the U.S., even if this doesn't match the reality on the ground, while the Iranians must accept total defeat, which they are not likely to do. Quote, that inevitability gets in the way of reaching a reasonable deal because no government, not just Iran's, can afford to be viewed as having capitulated, end quote, said Rob Malley, a former Iran negotiator in the Obama and Biden administrations. The continuing impasse with Iran comes as Trump faces domestic pressure over high U.S. gasoline prices and his own low approval ratings after he embarked on an unpopular war ahead of November's midterms. His Republican Party is struggling to maintain control of Congress. White House spokesman Olivia Wales defended Trump's diplomatic approach. Quote, President Trump is a master negotiator who always sets the right tone, she said, end quote. Apocalyptic threat. His most chilling words came last month when he threatened in a social media post to wipe out Iran's civilization unless it reached a deal, a message that administration officials told the Wall Street Journal was improvisational and not vetted as part of a national security strategy. Our next feature from the front page, school leaders detail barriers to investment. Uncertainty about state aid puts districts in limbo ahead of budget vote. Ben Zujimoto, news staff reporter. School district superintendents in Western New York rattle off factors that cause them to worry about money each spring. The formula for foundation aid, a large state funding stream, has not changed since 2012. A hold harmless provision protects districts from losing state aid amid enrollment declines, but also hamstrings their ability to keep up with the rising costs, much less invest in growth, leaders say. There is another quandary. Budgets that area voters will weigh Tuesday are based only on state funding projections. Deadlines for districts to file their financial plans for 2026-27 passed, while the New York State budget remains in limbo 6 weeks past its due date, leaving schools only with estimates for their largest source of aid. School superintendents and business offices have crafted conservative financial plans that demand sacrifice and often reward partnerships and new revenue sources. Quote, it's a continual examination of what do we own and what do we want to maintain versus what are those new things that we can continue to add, said Eden School Superintendent Jeff Sortisio, and that's because of the tight nature of the budget. Quote, it's nearly impossible to expand services, added Michael Capuana, Chief Executive Officer for Erie Wombosis, who shared the concerns of the 19 Erie County superintendents he represents at the state level. Dave Lilick, superintendent of Orchard Park Schools and a member of the Erie Niagara School Superintendents Association, was outspoken about the effect of the delayed state budget. He referred to reports that legislative disagreements were stalling the process. Quote, tying politics into funding schools with policy is, in my opinion, just bad governance, unquote, said Lilick, who has been involved in district budgets for more than a decade. Quote, I have no problem saying that. I have no problem. And it's really holding kids hostage in this game of getting certain policies across the line until we get the school aid we need, end quote. Education critics across the state will not feel much sympathy for conservative budgeting, pointing to New York's annual place among the leaders in per-student spending. According to an Investigative Post study in 2024, that figure ranges from about $22,000 to $34,000 per student in local districts, a rate generally lower than the state average, but still higher than most other states. At the same time, New York ranks among the country's leaders in number of students with disabilities and English language learners, significant factors in the increased spending. Spending perspectives aside, Western New York leaders voice the increasing vital role that schools play in their communities in meeting basic needs. That is even relevant in Orchard Park, which has one of the area's most affluent tax bases, but also has 15 to 20% economically disadvantaged students and 130 families that receive wraparound social work and family care. Quote, our schools were always the center of communities, but then, as we got into the pandemic and came out of the pandemic, schools truly are the heartbeat of communities, unquote, Lilick said. We don't just provide instruction from 8 to 3 at our buildings. Right. Consider Eden. Eden is a small rural district with recent academic success that now butts up against economic factors that could make those results tough to sustain. Sortisio said the district of about 1,200 students is proud of its 99% graduation rate last year. The district also boasts of Regents performance that soundly beats the state average. Strong attendance rates and elective courses such as woodworking, diesel technology, and small engine repair that will help it pivot with the state's standards and graduation expectations. A full-time social worker is dedicated to each district school, buoyed by 2 school psychologists and 4 counselors across the district. Quote, there are a lot of problem-solving skills in this community, end quote, the superintendent said. Quote, if you can solve problems, you'll be gainfully employed, end quote. That should be the makings of a financially sound district, right? Eden's population, however, has dropped by about 170 people over the last 15 years, according to census data. Its tax base is the 9th lowest among Erie County's 28 districts. Sortisio's finance team raised the tax levy for 2026-27 to its maximum amount, a 2.52% increase, despite being the only district in the country to present a lower budget, mostly due to a larger debt payment in the current year's budget. Financial help is not coming soon from the state either. Eden's student enrollment has fallen by about 400 students over those 15 years, and it does not have an unusually high rate of economically disadvantaged students, 30%, nor students with disabilities, 18%. Quote, Eden has very low growth. It's a difficult process, end quote, Sortisio said, adding that there is little real estate churn or new developments. Partnerships have come in handy. Quote, we have a great partnership with the town. That's where our school resource officers can't come from, he said. Without that, we'd really struggle to fill that pivotal role, end quote. Lilick, the Orchard Park superintendent, said Sortisio is not alone in the precarious position. Quote, for some of our communities who do not have that tax base, I think there's general and legitimate worry about where they're going to be in 3 to 5 years in terms of being able to fund just the basic programs, end quote, Lilick said. BOCES changes opportunities. From his position atop Erie 1's Board of Cooperative Education Services, Capuana sees budgets a little differently than local school superintendents. Erie 1's annual budget depends heavily on the requests of its 19 partner school districts, which choose each year from services such as career and technical and special education for students, as well as administrative and technical tools and support for district operations. The vast majority of these services are partially reimbursed by the state, but those formulas vary significantly by area. In tight budget years, school districts may be more eager to buy BOCES services because the partnership, highlighted by Erie 1's 5 instructional sites, is almost always cheaper than a district building a program from scratch. BOCES has added further momentum by bolstering vocational options, which now exceed 30 programs such as auto technician training, cosmetology, aviation, and digital media and animation. Quote, the programs reflect the changing landscape of the reality of work, Capuana said. The overall increase in students with disabilities and the desirability of trades programs have prompted some of the country's larger school districts to push funds towards BOCES. Kenton and Williamsville, for instance, have each budgeted more than $11 million for 26-27 and have projected roughly $4 million to be reimbursed. BOCES' own costs have increased. Its rent expenses have nearly doubled, and its Mammoth Capital project on Malden Avenue eyes a September 2027 opening, which means districts share in those costs. But legislation passed last year has begun to cushion financial hurdles districts face in a BOCES partnership. The state will now reimburse a greater share of BOCES career and technical education teachers' salaries above the $30,000 cap in place the last 35 years. That was the largest constraint in the aid formula, Capuana said. The new legislation bumps that figure to $40,000 this coming year, $50,000 the following year, and $60,000 the next. For the first year, that is an additional $1.9 million in aid, Capuana said. And it is progress toward making BOCES access more equitable. Capuana also serves as a field representative between all 19 partner superintendents and State Education Commissioner Betty A. Rosa, an important advocacy role in which Capuana listens to local budget concerns and voices the common threads to state leadership. BOCES also gives superintendent searches, such as Buffalo Schools' recent change, and provides consultant services. The rising costs of special education and transportation are stressing local school leaders, Capuana explained, as well as impending changes due to the state educational department's New York Inspires initiative that will redefine what it means to be a high school graduate. Quote, the fiscal reality of our school districts is stable, but under pressure, end quote, Capuana said. Our next feature from the front page, modern AC system was invented by an Evans man in 1906. Carrier's ingenuity places him among notables of industry, J. Tokaz, news staff reporter. It is one of the great ironies of American ingenuity that the man credited with inventing modern air conditioning hailed from western New York, a region of the country famous for cold and snow. Or maybe Lake Erie inspired Willis H. Carrier, who grew up in the town of Evans, about a mile from the shoreline of one of the world's largest natural air coolers. Carrier rose from humble beginnings as the only child of farming parents and joined the pantheon of the most influential inventors and industrialists in the 250 years since America's founding. Time magazine in 1998 put Carrier on its list of 100 persons of the century, alongside other, quote, builder and titan, end quote, notables such as Henry Ford, Walt Disney, and Bill Gates. His exploits in controlling the temperature and humidity of indoor air, first as an engineer with Buffalo Forge Company and later as founder of Carrier Engineering Corps, helped spur a population boom in the southern states and a national love affair with movie theaters and shopping malls. Air conditioning led to an exponential increase in factory and office productivity and a proliferation of skyscrapers in the world's largest cities. And it is currently at the crux a global conundrum. More people than ever rely on air conditioning to provide relief from excessive heat, even as a system first developed by Carrier more than a century ago contributes to increased temperatures on the planet. Carrier was born in 1876 and raised in a farmhouse on Route 5 that is now occupied by a VFW post. He credited his mother for teaching him a lifelong lesson when he was 9 years old to help him overcome the difficulty he had grasping the concept of fractions. Elizabeth Carrier had her son cut apples retrieved from the farmhouse basement into quarters, halves, and eighths, and then told him to add and subtract the various pieces. Fractions took on a whole different meaning, and Carrier said he felt like he had made a great discovery, according to his biography, Willis Haviland Carrier, Father of Air Conditioning, written in 1952 by Margaret Ingalls, who was the second woman in the U.S. to earn an engineering degree. So Carrier said his mother, quote, opened up a new world to me and gave me a pattern for solving problems that I followed ever since, end quote. Elizabeth Carrier died just 2 years later. Willis's father, Dwayne, remarried a widow with 3 grown children, and at age 15, Willis moved to Buffalo and lived with one of his adult step-siblings so he could attend Central High School with the goal of winning a scholarship to Cornell University. Straight out of Cornell in 1901, he landed an engineering job at Buffalo Forge for $10 per week. Buffalo Forge did ventilation work for manufacturers and received a request from a Brooklyn plant to solve humidity issues that were throwing its color printing operations out of whack. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Not sure how to address the problem, Carrier's bosses sent the recent Cornell graduate, who had quickly gained a reputation as a whiz kid, to Brooklyn to investigate. Carrier devised a series of tests using equipment normally used to test heaters and converting it for the purposes of cooling. So instead of circulating steam through coils, he used cold water. He then calculated the dew point temperatures at which the air inside the printing plant had the right amount of moisture for accurate printing. And finally, he balanced the coil surface temperature and airflow rates to bring down the room temperature to the selected dew point temperature. In 1979, the Carrier Corps became a division of the international conglomerate United Technologies. It returned to being a standalone company in 2020 with its headquarters in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, an area of undeveloped land in the 1950s that now has a population of about 65,000 people. Our next feature is in world news. London hit by immigration, pro-Palestine protests. Reuters. Tens of thousands of people marched through central London on Saturday in 2 separate protests. One against high levels of immigration and a perceived Islamic threat to British identity, and another in support of Palestinians. Police deployed 4,000 officers, including reinforcements from outside the capital, and pledged, quote, the most assertive possible use of our powers in what they called their biggest public order operation in years. By late afternoon in London, about 4 hours after both marches started, police said they had made 31 arrests for a range of offenses and described both protests as, quote, largely without sufficient incident, end quote. They had earlier forecast turnout of at least 80,000 people. Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Friday accused organizers of the United Kingdom march of, quote, peddling hate and division, plain and simple, end quote. The march was organized by anti-Islam activist Stephen Yaxley Lennon, also known as Tommy Robinson. The government barred 11 people it described as, quote, foreign far-right agitators from entering Britain to address the protest. A previous protest led by Robinson in September drew around 150,000 people, police said, and featured a video address by U.S. tech billionaire Elon Musk. Scuffles left 26 officers injured, including 4 seriously. Home flags waved. On Saturday, Robinson supporters gathered in central London, waving mainly British and English flags. Quote, "I think that too much migration, not migration, but too much migration, is causing a lot of problems, upsetting a delicate balance here," said Alison Parr, who also criticized net zero environmental policies. Annual net migration approached 900,000 in 2022 and 2023, but fell back to around 200,000 last year after tighter work visa rules. Concern over immigration, including the arrival of asylum seekers on small boats, has weighed on Starmer's popularity and boosted the right-wing Reform UK Party, whose leader, Nigel Farage, has distanced himself from Robinson. Some protesters chanted abuse about Starmer. Robinson, who has convictions for assault, stalking, and other offenses, said during the march that, quote, "We are awakening Great Britain, the cultural awakening, the cultural revolution, the spiritual awakening, it's all underway," end quote. Earlier this year, he traveled to the U.S., where he met a State Department official and addressed supporters about what he called, quote, "the dangers of Islam," end quote, and, quote, "the Islamification of Great Britain," end quote. Census data showed 6.5% of people in England and Wales identified as Muslim in 2021, up from 4.9% in 2011. Among those on the main stage at the end of the march were 3 French women from anti-immigration feminist group Nemesis. They appeared wearing Islamic-style face veils and encouraged jeers before removing the veils to whoops from the crowd and gave a short speech critical of Muslims and immigration. Later, a cellist performed with what appeared to be rashers of raw bacon on his shoulders. Nakba Day. Nearby, demonstrators carrying Palestinian flags and placards calling for an end to the conflict in Gaza held a march to mark Nakba Day, commemorating Palestinians' loss of land in the 1948 war that followed the creation of Israel. Nakba means catastrophe in Arabic. Quote, "Israel, its behavior is unjust beyond belief," protester Sharon DeWitt said. Quote, "After the Holocaust, etc., all you can do is wish the Jewish people all the best, but they won't be able to live in peace until they allow the Palestinian people to form their own state," end quote. London has recently seen a spate of arson attacks on Jewish sites, and 2 Jewish men were stabbed last month in an incident being treated as terrorism. Police said repeated large pro-Palestinian marches, 33 since the Hamas-led attack on Israel in October 2023, had left many Jewish people feeling too intimidated to enter central London. While protesters held a range of views, people said the marches routinely led to arrests for racially and religiously aggravated public order offenses. Some protesters on Saturday chanted, "Death to the IDF," referring to the Israeli army, language that police previously said had been a reason for arrest when aimed at Jewish people. Hamas chief dead. Meanwhile, an Israeli airstrike on Gaza killed the chief of Hamas military wing, the most senior official from the Palestinian militant group, killed by Israel since an October U.S.-backed ceasefire agreement that was meant to halt fighting. Our next world story: Canada and Nordics deepen defense ties after threats by U.S. Maria Cheng, Reuters. Cambridge Bay, Nunavut. Since President Trump's barrage of threats to seize Greenland, authorities on the frozen island have been seeking help from a fellow northern ally, Canada. Canada. A reserve unit of the Canadian Armed Forces, called the Rangers, has long maintained a year-round presence in mostly inaccessible Arctic communities. For 3 years, authorities in Greenland and Denmark have consulted with Canadian officials on how to set up their own version of the Rangers, conversations that grew more urgent with Trump's threats and growing fears of Russian hostility in the Arctic. Quote, The rhetoric coming out of the White House has sped up efforts to rebuff the idea that Arctic communities need the U.S. to come in and save them, end quote, said Whitney Lackenbauer, an honorary lieutenant colonel Canadian Ranger involved in the talks, who spoke with Reuters during a recent Arctic snowmobile trek by the Rangers that covered more than 3,000 miles. Quote, the Nordic countries and Canada we're increasingly realizing we can come together in military and diplomatic ways to send a message that carries moral weight, end quote. As Canada attempts to pivot from relying on the U.S. to protect its vast Arctic, Prime Minister Mark Carney is strengthening ties and exchanging security tips with the Nordic countries, which he describes as trusted partners. Canada's increased defense collaboration with the Nordics is part of Carney's effort to strengthen alliances between what he calls quote-unquote middle powers, in a world where the United States is considered a less reliable partner. The White House said Trump's leadership has prompted allies to recognize the need to meaningfully contribute to their own defense, end quote, and that the Arctic is a critical region for U.S. national security and the economy. Quote, the administration is participating in diplomatic high-level technical talks with the governments of Greenland and Denmark to address the United States national security interests in Greenland, end quote, a White House spokesperson said in an email. Alliances are shifting in the Arctic as climate change makes it more accessible. Russia has far more military bases than any other nation there, and in recent years, China has started to increase its presence in the mineral-rich area, mostly in partnership with Russia. While Carney says Canada will no longer rely on any other nation to protect its own territory, he says the Arctic's greatest threat is from Russia, and the Nordics have been boosting their own defenses since Russia invaded Ukraine. In March, Canada and the 5 Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, agreed to deepen their cooperation in military procurement and ramp up defense production to deal with security threats, including cyber attacks. A plan for how Greenland might adapt the Canadian Rangers is expected by the end of this year, according to government policy documents. Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand told Reuters she meets regularly with Nordic officials to work on collective defense and Arctic security. Canada's partnership with the United States through NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, remains critical, she said, but Canada is focused on bolstering new alliances. That includes the opening of a Canadian consulate in Nuuk in February and an invitation to her Nordic counterparts to visit Canada's Arctic this year. Quote, we have to build something new, and it has to be a world order that is built on the values that we represent, end quote. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen told Carney during the Nordic-Canadian Summit in Oslo in March. In April, Alexander Stubb became the first Finnish president to visit Canada in a dozen years and signed several agreements on Arctic cooperation. Stubb and Carney took to the ice in Ottawa for a hockey practice, and afterwards Stubb said he and Carney message each other almost every day. The two national leaders sometimes chat about hockey or baseball, Stubb told reporters, but, quote, most of the time it's about NATO or Ukraine or Iran, end quote. Our next feature is a national story. Colorado's Polis is accused of caving in to Trump's demand. Seth Klarman and Nick Coltrane, The Denver Post. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Denver. Elected officials from across Colorado largely ripped into Governor Jared Polis's decision on Friday to dramatically accelerate the release of Tina Peters, accusing the governor of caving to President Trump by commuting the election conspiracist's 9-year sentence. The condemnations were swift, with some officials saying the decision undercut the integrity of the nation's elections. Outcry came mostly from Polis's fellow Democrats who had roundly urged and pleaded with the governor not to interfere with the prison sentence for the former Mesa County clerk, but also from a coalition of county clerks. Word of the impending decision had begun to travel earlier in the day Friday, and by the time Polis's office released a statement that included Peters on a list of other commutations, an array of officials had readied blistering reactions. The Colorado County Clerks Association wrote that the state's election officials were, quote, furious, disgusted, and deeply disappointed by the governor's decision, end quote. Quote, this is now Governor Polis's legacy, end quote, the Clerks Association wrote. Quote, he will not be able to run from it or redefine it later. When given the opportunity to stand firmly for the rule of law, for the integrity of Colorado's elections, and for the public servants who defend them, he chose a different path. This decision is shameful, end quote. Shad Marib, the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party, said, the commutation, quote, sends a message to future bad actors that election tampering has consequences, unless you're friends with the president, end quote. The Democratic leadership of the State House and Senate wrote that they, quote, strongly oppose Polis's move. The leaders of the Colorado AFL-CIO and Colorado Wins, which represents state employees, both condemned Polis's decision in separate statements. And U.S. Senator John Hickenlooper said Polis's action sent the wrong message, writing a statement, quote, Tina Peters is guilty as sin and a disgrace to Colorado, end quote. Polis, who is in his final year in office after 2 terms, announced that Peters would be released on June 1st. She has been incarcerated since October 2024, but the Colorado Court of Appeals threw out her more than 8-year prison sentence last month. She had not yet been resentenced. Quote, the crimes you were convicted of are very serious, and you deserve to spend time in prison for these offenses, end quote, Polis wrote in his clemency letter. Quote, however, this is an extremely unusual and lengthy sentence for a first-time offender who committed nonviolent crimes, end quote. Had she lost her bid for clemency, Peters, 70, would not have been eligible for release until November 2028. Some Colorado elected officials praised Polis's decision. U.S. Representative Lauren Boebert, a Republican who has long defended Peters, wrote on social media, quote, Polis and I have had many conversations regarding Tina's unjust punishment and her release. My heart was filled with joy when she called me today to share this great news. Republican State Rep. Scott Bottoms, who was running for governor, wrote on social media that Polis, quote, did the right thing by commuting Peters' sentence. If elected, he pledged to give Peters a full pardon. State Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer, another Republican running for governor, said Polis's action might have been premature. Quote, the court process was still ongoing, she said, and I believe this matter would have been best handled through the judicial system rather than through executive action. I would have preferred to allow the judicial process under which the trial judge has been ordered by the appeals court to revisit the sentencing of Ms. Peters to run its course before considering a commutation, end quote. In an interview Friday, Secretary of State Gina Griswold, a Democrat, accused Polis of bowing to Trump, who has repeatedly called for Peters' release and has taken several punitive actions against the state in recent months. Quote, we're just seeing a lot of favors curried to lawlessness. And what I worry about is in a time where the federal justice system is crippled through this corrupt federal administration, our state judicial system has to work, Griswold said. Quote, end quote, and then there has to be some checks to lawlessness, end quote. Senator Katie Wallace, a Democrat who'd organized a March letter from lawmakers urging Polis not to touch Peters' sentence, said that the governor's decision amounted to, quote, wanton disregard for the safety of our elections, end quote. Quote, he's doing it before her new sentence is even given again, end quote, Wallace said. Quote, the courts are under an order to resentence Tina Peters, and he doesn't know what he's forgiving, end quote. Our next national story, $1.7 billion compensation fund may end Trump's suit against the IRS. Zoe Tillman, Chris Strom, and Hadriana Lowenkron, Bloomberg News. Washington. U.S. officials have discussed creating a $1.7 billion federal fund to pay victims of so-called government weaponization to resolve President Trump's lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service. $1 million payouts the administration has already made to some of his supporters provide a roadmap for where the money might go. The settlement talks have taken place ahead of a key deadline this coming week in Trump's $10 billion suit seeking to hold the IRS liable for the 2019 leak of his tax information, according to people familiar with the discussions. One of the people who asked not to be identified, as the conversations were private, said officials are considering the fund option, as well as possibly dropping audits into the president, his family, and his businesses. ABC News earlier reported the fund possibility. No decisions have been made about the fund size. It would be open for claims regardless of a claimant's political party, but details of how disbursements would be approved are still being negotiated. Even if Trump doesn't get a payout, any funding arrangement is likely to raise questions about whether the president and other U.S. officials are improperly using taxpayers' dollars to settle personal and political scores. Trump and his allies have often claimed the federal government under former President Joe Biden, quote, weaponized, end quote, enforcement of the law, targeting conservatives for their political affiliation. Already under Trump, the government has reversed its positions in court cases involving some of his allies and supporters. Two people who sued over the 2016 election interference probe that Trump labeled a witch hunt, quote unquote, received $1.25 million payments. Hundreds of supporters charged in connection with the January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol and later granted clemency by Trump are seeking monetary damages. A former Trump White House lawyer is suing for compensation over alleged privacy violations during a congressional inquiry into the 2020 election. And House Democrats announced this past week they're investigating approximately $4 million paid to a group of FBI employees who alleged they faced political retaliation during the Biden administration. Democrats and government watchdog groups have denounced the prospect of any settlement agreement between Trump, who is represented by private counsel, and the executive branch that he controls. Indeed, the federal judge in Florida handling Trump's IRS lawsuit is weighing whether she has jurisdiction when the president appears to control both sides of the dispute. Under the Constitution and long-standing legal precedents, courts can only hear cases in which the parties are actually at odds with each other. The judge asked for written briefs addressing the issue by Wednesday. Quote, "It's just another way for President Trump to treat the American taxpayers' money as like a cash machine to serve his own personal interests," said Virginia Cantor, ethics chief counsel at the Democracy Defenders Fund advocacy group and a former White House lawyer. Tom Fitton, president of the conservative advocacy group Judicial Watch, said he thought Trump should receive compensation along with the January 6 defendants and Republicans targeted for their political affiliations. The federal government owes him big money for what he has suffered, end quote, Fitton said. The IRS data leak at the center of the case was a significant blow to the agency. A former IRS contractor, Charles Littlejohn, pleaded guilty to 2023 to stealing tax records for thousands of wealthy Americans, including Trump, Ken Griffin, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos, and leaking them to news organizations. Littlejohn was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Our next feature is in business. Banking. Wilmington Trust is making a name for itself in Buffalo. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. Wilmington Trust has been staffing up in the Buffalo area. The subsidiary of M&T Bank now has about 150 employees locally, including 40 employees it has added in the past couple of years. If you didn't know Wilmington Trust had such a significant presence here. M&T is working on that. The bank has put up Wilmington Trust sign at M&T Center, the office complex at Fountain Plaza, connected to the Gold Dome building. Quote, it's sort of a really clear visual commitment to both brands and our ability to deliver those capabilities, end quote, said Christina Brazina, the head of affluent markets for Wilmington Trust. M&T in 2011 acquired Wilmington Trust, which provides wealth management and corporate trust services. Brazina said there is good reason for Wilmington Trust, which is based in Delaware, to build up its workforce here. Quote, we believe that there's a lot we can do to help our customers in this space, whether it's the business customers, the consumers, or those of the higher net worth, end quote, she said. Quote, we want to do even more for our community in terms of planning and having individual relationships, end quote. Brazina has worked for M&T for 27 years in all facets of the bank's operations. Wilmington Trust complements the other financial services M&T provides, she said. Quote, what I think is tremendous is the partnership across the bank, she said. It's at a level that we're so interested in sharing with our clients and helping the clients from the full spectrum, end quote. Top financial concern, grocery prices. Grocery prices lead the list of Americans' top financial concerns in a survey conducted on behalf of KeyBank. 58% of respondents to the survey cited grocery prices as a financial concern. The next most cited concern was housing costs, followed by healthcare expenses and global factors. The survey of 1,000 people was conducted in January before soaring gasoline prices became a prominent issue amid the war with Iran. Key's Financial Mobility Pulse poll found that 28% of Americans felt negative about the economy, up from 25% in 2025. Americans aren't just waiting for conditions to improve, said Dan Brown, KeyBank's Director of Consumer Product Management. Quote, people are navigating the current economic climate through daily decisions that are increasingly becoming lasting habits, he said. 88% of respondents said they have made at least one meaningful financial adjustment. The most cited answers were switching to less expensive brands of services, canceled or reduced subscriptions or memberships, 51%, and taking on side work or additional hours for extra income, 35%. A fair shot for small businesses. Local entrepreneurs are getting a boost from the FAIR program, short for Financial Plus Artificial Intelligence Resilience. It's a free initiative of the Enterprise Center at Pathstone. The goal is to provide small businesses with technological skills, financial knowledge, and personalized support. The participating businesses will learn how to put AI to work. Quote, artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming one of the most powerful tools small business owners can use to compete and grow in today's economy, said Javier Zapata, Executive Director of the Enterprise Center at Pathstone. Quote, through this grant, entrepreneurs will gain the knowledge and practical insights needed to effectively integrate AI into their business models and stay ahead of emerging trends, end quote. Our next feature in business is The Trinket Trend Taking Over Your Wallet, Small Splurges by Lauren Schwan. Nerd Wallet. Do you own an Owala or Stanley water bottle? How about a Labubu? Any Jellycat plushies or bag charms or squishy toys like Nidos? If so, you're part of the quote-unquote trinket trend. The trinket trend, which involves collecting or trading small items such as toys and accessories, has exploded over the past few years. You might find that these little objects can fill you with joy or regret. It's a fine line. What's with all the trinkets? Gen Z is a major force behind the trinket trend. More than half of Gen Zers aren't confident the economy will improve this year, said Mary Lee Bliss, Chief Content Officer at the youth research organization YPulse. She spoke during the National Retail Federation State of Retail and the Consumer event in March. With high living costs and a tough job market, it's easy to understand why many people don't feel optimistic. Gen Zers also are more likely than members of other age groups to say their top financial priority is buying the things they want, Bliss said. These factors drive Gen Zers to seek out quote-unquote little pieces of joy, she said. It's not necessarily that huge splurge, but the more consistent purchases that they can have that little dopamine hit to kind of get through the weeks, she said. Trinkets scratch that itch. They're small and often affordable. Funko characters retail for about $15, and Neato squeeze toys are about $5. Trinket culture is popular among other generations too. Sensory toys are especially big with Gen Alpha right now, and many adults find trinkets cute or satisfying. This plays into the larger trend of kidulting, quote unquote, where adults engage in activities or collect toys that are traditionally designed for kids. It's a way to feel comforted from the daily grind and pressures of adult life, says Kiki Jacobson, a licensed mental health counselor in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's not all fun and games, though. Fads and collectibles are nothing new. Many might remember the craze surrounding Beanie Babies, Troll Dolls, Tamagotchis, or Jelly Bracelets. Products like Sunny Angels, Funko Pop figures, and Trader Joe's tote bags are just modern equivalents. But TikTok, Instagram, and other social media platforms can make today's trends feel more intense, says Jacobson, who specializes in financial therapy. Algorithms amplify what captures attention, she says. Surprise reveals, unboxings, and product drops create emotional hooks and a sense of scarcity. While spending money on trinkets probably won't keep you from buying a house, the cost can mount quickly. One purchase can easily turn into 3 or 4. Low prices aren't always guaranteed either. Demand for items like Labubu monsters and more recently Neato toys sent them flying off the shelves. Some of these hard-to-find trinkets sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars on the resale market. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Wayne A. Anderson. Burgash Joan Hauser. William C. Broutlocht. Nancy A. Casper, Nee West. Mary Ann Chase. Eileen A. Call, Nee Cocker. Phoebe Appleton Grauer. Chad Bojanowski. Amy Bull, Nee Greenberg. Stephen J. Chaika. Thomas G. Dryja. John B. Elliott, Jack. Thomas Leo Fitzsimmons, Jr. Kathleen A. Gill, Nee Arnold. Marita H. Doria, Nee Holleran. Neil C. DeLeo. Carl R. DeViver. Paul E. Haag. Lois A. Held, Nee Bowley. Kenneth Robert Kahn, M.D. Christopher M. Klodzinski. Susan J. Lehner, Nee Irons. Robert Michael Musty. Arlene J. Pardika. Virginia M. Homewood. Gregory Knopp, Cheryl S. Laurie, Gloria R. Kahir, Ni Vara, Charles Petrus, Phyllis Milano, Michael Mickey Krockomberger, Kathleen Milligan, Gary T. Havagimian, Francis Fran Ann Foman, Richard M. Kuta, William S. Nichols, David Plowden, Charles Murray, Marcia A. Polek Ni Kasser, Patricia J. Roloff Ni Eldridge, Paul Shepard, Sr., John M. Snyder, Phyllis A. Tribus Ni Dota, Kenneth Volk, John D. Rickard, Sr., David Shamrock, Alan H. Spencer, Esquire, James S. Smirgalia, Clifford J. Stephan Jr., Barbara H. Victori Ni Olszewski, Sherry Ann Wendling, Barbara Ann Westfall Ni Grubka, Benjamin Wells Wilton, Sabina Zolti, Carol M. Zurcher Ni Curtin. Our next feature is today's horoscopes. Happy birthday for Sunday, May 17th, 2026. You're ambitious and determined. You're clear-sighted and perceptive, which makes you people-oriented. This year, exciting changes will bring increased freedom. Stay flexible and let go of things that have impeded your progress. Aries. This is the perfect quote-unquote choose your adventure day. Take a short trip. Enjoy schmoozing with friends, siblings, and neighbors. Tonight, conversations. Taurus. You are the financial wizard of the zodiac. And although today is a fun day, you also have one eye on your finances, which is a good thing. Tonight, check your money. Gemini. This is an upbeat day full of fun opportunities. However, you're a bit restless and excited. Because of this, be careful that you don't leap without looking today. Tonight, you're strong. Cancer. Today, in particular, is a bit restless. You have that feeling that you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You might choose to get things done. Tonight, privacy. Leo. This is a lovely, playful day. You make a great impression on everyone. A friend might surprise you, or you might meet someone who is unusual. Tonight, friendships. Virgo. Today, you're eager to do something different. Travel or be a tourist in your own city. Tonight, show respect. Libra. Travel plans might be interrupted today. They could be delayed or canceled, or perhaps you will suddenly have to travel when you did not expect to do so. Tonight, explore. Scorpio. Because you need more rest this month, this could be the perfect day to sleep in and have a lazy start to your day. Tonight, check your finances. Sagittarius. Sports events and competitive athletics might catch your attention. You've got a lot of energy to socialize and have fun tonight. Or today. Tonight, cooperate. Capricorn. Something unexpected might impact your work and your health. Pet owners should know this is a mildly accident-prone day for your pet. Tonight, work. Aquarius. This is a positive, upbeat day. However, there's a mild accident-prone influence for your kids, so keep your eyes open. Tonight, play. Pisces. Your home routine might be interrupted today. Small appliances might break down, or a minor breakage could occur. Tonight, relax. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Sunday, May 17th, 2026, on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your reader is Ron Bickelman. Water Authority to spend $30 million to replace some of its lead pipes. The Erie County Water Authority has hit the ground running this spring as it seeks to identify and replace all lead water lines within its surface area. The authority is in a race against federal mandate to provide drinking water to residents that does not exceed the national standards for lead. With $30 million budgeted for the effort this year, Erie County Water Authority aims to replace about 2,500 lead pipes before the ground gets too cold again. This is a huge jump from the 900 pipes replaced last year and will bring the water purveyor closer to replacing all of the lead pipes in its system, which it estimates to be about 6,000 pipes. Last year, we ran out of time before we could really get going, said Len Kowalski, executive engineer for ECWA. This year, we've got a pretty good start already. By 2027, the water utility is required by federal rules to deliver water with lead levels that do not exceed the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's new standard of 10 parts per billion, down from the previous limit of 15 parts per billion. And by 2037, all lead pipes under its jurisdiction must be identified and replaced. The Water Authority has also been experimenting with adding orthophosphate to its water supply to potentially meet the lower federal standards by 2027. Orthophosphate creates a floating on the inside of the pipes that prevents some of the lead from leaching into the drinking water. But in an effort to meet the lower standards while also reaching the 2037 lead pipe replacement mandate ahead of schedule, the Water Authority has gone all in on replacing the pipes. The Water Authority already spent about $15 million in 2025 to identify and replace lead pipes. Doubling that spending in 2026 should give the program a big boost to ensure it meets its goal, Kowalski said. Removing is the only permanent way to protect public health, Kowalski said. Exposure to even small amounts of lead can be dangerous to human health, especially to children. In children, the exposure to low levels of lead has been linked to several central and peripheral nervous system damage, learning disabilities, shorter stature, impaired hearing, and impaired formation and function of the blood cells, according to the EPA. Adults can also be impacted by exposure to lead, and health effects can include nausea, constipation, hypertension, miscarriages, or stillbirths, reduced sperm count, abnormal sperm, malaise, seizures, hearing loss, and fatigue, according to the New York State Department of Health. ECWA is working with towns, villages, and cities around the country, including Tonawanda, Depew, Lancaster, Cheektowaga, and Sloan, Kowalski said. Once the lead pipes has been identified, it can take about 2 to 3 weeks to replace them with copper, Kowalski said. In some cases, it may take longer, and it requires a different contractor to replace the pipes than the one investigated. Kowalski said he believes the Water Authority is on track to meet its goal of replacing lead pipes in its service by the end of 2027. The Water Authority still has about 13,000 unknown in its system, Kowalski said. Those are the pipes that have not been investigated or determined to have lead, but thousands of investigations are expected to happen this year. We realize it takes time. We realize it can be a disruption, he said. So we are working hard to do this as quickly as possible. Continuing along now in the crime court section, judge rejects bid for special prosecutor in case involving relationship between ADA and cop. A judge on Friday rejected a request to name a special prosecutor in a case that raises questions of transparency about how the Erie County District Attorney's Office handled circumstances involving a now former prosecutor who is in an undisclosed relationship with a Buffalo police officer. State Supreme Court Justice Paul Wojtaszek denied the request from a Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo to disqualify the district attorney's office from the prosecution of Cameo Simmons, whose attorneys argued that there was no egregious prosecutorial misconduct. Legal aid attorneys argued prosecutors should have turned over their internal investigation into the former ADA Sienna P. Jones, who was fired last month after it became to light that she failed to disclose she was in a romantic relationship with the officer. Jones handled the November 26 felony hearing in the Simmons case, a hearing in which the officer Joshua Jamison was a prosecution witness and answered questions from Jones on the witness stand. In issuing his ruling, which he described as not an easy decision, Watazik noted that Jones has since been fired for misconduct and prosecutors have turned over information to defense attorneys aside from their internal investigation. This matter now appears to be a discovery conflict and should be resolved by a presiding judge, Watazik said. County Court Judge James Bargnesi is presiding over the Simmons case. Simmons faces a felony weapons possession charge stemming from a November 21st knife call at a Buffalo convenience store. We are disappointed and obviously disagree, but we respect the judge's decision and will continue with Mr. Simmons' defense. Ian Harrington, Deputy Executive Director of Legal Aid, said in an email. It was revealed during an argument in court on Friday that the district attorney's office was initially told by Jones in March that her relationship with the officer had ended, as well as that she thought they had may potentially get back together. The DA's office didn't immediately disclose that the defense attorney's prosecutors provided none of the information in a meeting with the attorneys from Legal Aid on April 2nd. They said on that information, says Carla Benz, managing attorney for Legal Aid. Simmons' defense attorney contended that the DA's office has a conflict of interest in pursuing the criminal case against Simons because of the case that went to trial in Buffalo City Courts in March against Adam Redden. Jones was a prosecutor, Jamison was a witness, and Legal Aid attorneys represented the defendant in the case. There was ongoing communications between Jones and Jamison, as well as between Jones and Officer Gerald Lewandowski, another witness during the trial, Ben said. There also may have been intimate relations going on during the trial involving Jones and Jamison, she said. Why should there be any integrity in Cameo Simmons' investigation and the Cameo Simmons trial preparation and what happened in this case when we know about what was going on in Redden, Ben said. The issues go beyond just a romantic relationship between Jones and Jamison, Legal Aid attorneys argued. It's much greater than that, said Fonda Kubiak, Legal Aid's Director of Litigating Training. It's potentially interference with ongoing criminal investigation. It's credibility issues, not just for the Officer Jamison, but for Officer Lewandowski. It is what the supervisors in the DA's office did once they became aware of what was transpiring in the case in the Redden trial. Prosecutors defend handling. It was also revealed in court that prosecutors turned over their internal investigation into Jones and Bargnesi in order to the judge to determine what materials should be shared in pretrial process of exchanging evidence known as discovery. Prosecutors initially thought Jamison had lied to Jones, but later learned their adverse credibility determination regarding Jamison was wrong, said Paul Williams III, Appeals Bureau Chief for District Attorney Mike Keene. We lit him up even though we shouldn't have, Williams said of Jamison. Williams accuses Legal Aid attorneys of nitpicking about when information was turned over to them. This is not a foot dragging here, Williams told the judge. There's no lack of transparency. Prosecutors never told the defense attorneys to identify a third man involved in the shoving match in a South Buffalo Bar Dog and Pony Saloon, the incident where Jamison and Lewandowski were also off duty, that was the root of the Redden case. The person was a third off-duty Buffalo police officer. It was revealed in court on Friday. Jamison and Lewandowski told DA office that they never told Jones that they didn't know the identity of the third officer, despite her claims, her supervisors, that they did. District Attorney's Office did not want public to have access to the defense motion for a special prosecutor. Watazik previously granted a motion to temporarily seal the documents by Legal Aid. Continuing along now with local news, Poloncarz vetoes youth hunting law, setting up possible override. Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz vetoed a law that would allow hunters ages 12 and 13 in the county to legally shoot deer, setting the stage for a potential override. Poloncarz, in a statement, stood by his view that he doesn't believe children that young should be allowed to hunt big game, even accompanied by a mentor. I have read too many child fatality reports to sign a law that could potentially result in a child dying because of its passage, Poloncarz said. The legislature has the opportunity to override my veto, and they may choose to do so, he said. That is their constitutional right, and I respect that decision. But if they override this veto and a child dies in the future, my conscience will be clear, knowing I did everything I could to try to prevent the tragedy. Erie County is the last remaining county outside New York City area to ban adolescent children from hunting deer with a firearm. Last month, legislators voted 7-3 in favor of the hunting law, one vote shy of creating a veto-proof majority. But legislator Chris Green, Republican from Clarence, who supports the law, was absent on the day of the vote. If all legislators in favor of the law are present when it comes before them, and none of them change their position, they would have enough votes to create a supermajority to override the veto. Legislator Lindsay Lorigo, Republican from West Seneca, said there is overwhelming support in the community for the law, and said it has been applied safely in other counties. I think the decision the county executive made was based purely on his own personal opinions and not the facts of the program, Lorigo said. Lorigo noted that Erie County and Rockland County currently don't opt into the state law that was passed in 2021. 5 years ago, the legislators lacked enough votes to override Polencars's veto to enable Erie County to opt in. Legislators' view has 30 days to decide whether to try to override Polencars's veto. Lorigo said she would like to see it on the agenda for the next regular meeting, which is May 28th. I don't think this is a political theater that could have been avoided, she said. Polenkar said his veto is nothing about being against hunting. He and his family remembers who hunt. It's about whether I believe it's appropriate for 12 and 13-year-olds to hunt big game, even with a mentor, he said. Because of the risk and because of the child fatality reports I have read, I do not believe it is. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Time is 12 minutes after the hour. In local news, Armory Restaurant Italian Eatery, operated by undercover narcotics cop, closes its door. If the walls inside the old Armory restaurant could talk, they would probably reveal some wild and intriguing tales. And a lot of those tales, no doubt, would revolve around the mysterious undercover cop whose family owned and operated the West Side Restaurant for many years. After 80 years of business, the establishment at 311 Connecticut Avenue closed its doors last month. Closing down is one of the toughest decisions I've made in my life, said Joseph Petronella, whose family owned the business for 8 decades. But we just weren't doing enough business to keep it open. Known for its tasty, authentic, very inexpensive Italian food, the Armory had a fascinating history. During its heyday in the 50s and through the 80s, the place was a hangout for all kinds of Buffalo characters, including mayors, political bosses, political operatives, famous and infamous public officials, news reporters, lawyers, FBI agents, local cops, prosecutors, and occasionally people on the wrong side of the law. Perhaps the most famous dinners at the Armory were visiting movie stars, including Robert Redford, Robert Duvall, James Caan, Glenn Close, and others who stopped in to try the authentic food while filming movies in Buffalo. Former Buffalo Common Council member Alfred T. Coppola, now 85, recalled eating lunch at the Armory at least once a week during the 17 years he served as city government. On any given day, you'd have people of every walk of life in there. Mayors, all kinds of government officials, people down on both sides of the luck, El Coppola said. We'd go in there to discuss city business. His cousin, retired investigative journalist, lawyer, and journalism professor Lee Coppola, 82, had countless food times at the Armory. He recalled one afternoon when a group of criminal prosecutors sat on one table and a group of well-known criminals sat on the next table, and a noisy gang of news reporters sat at another table nearby. I won't say we were all friendly to each other, but everyone was congenial, the retired newsman said. From Channel 4 News and anchor Carol Nigarelli, known for her working days as Carol Jason remembered going there several times with fellow journalists. The Armory was one of my first introductions to Buffalo's Italian and Sicilian heritage, and it came with some intrigue, said Nigarelli, who is retired and living in Omaha, Nebraska. What I remember most was a bearded man at the door greeting a few of us from Channel 4 and then showing us to a table. He lingered at our table talking to the station's resident Sicilian investigative reporter, Lee Coppola. The bearded guy was Joe Petronella, for whom running a restaurant was not his main job. Petronella's main job was buying illegal drugs from criminals as an undercover narcotics investigator for Erie County Sheriff's Office. Negrelli said she had heard and read many things about Petronella in his undercover work, but had never seen him because he was always careful to make sure his face was never shown in the newspaper on TV reports. Apparently, when Petronella wasn't sleuthing, he would help out his family at the tavern, Negrelli said. From that moment on, I was in awe of all things West Side. My friends who came to the restaurant, people who knew me, they knew about my undercover work, Petronella, now 84, recalled. Other customers who came there, didn't really know. I don't think anyone ever bought drugs from and put them in jail because they came to the Armory to eat, as far as I know. Otherwise, they might have done me in. Reporters at what was called the Buffalo Evening News, mainly Modesto Argenio, Anthony Cardinelli, and Lee Coppola, wrote dozens of stories about Petronella's colorful undercover adventures, including the time he used a radio transmitter hidden inside an arm cast while making drug buys. During another investigation, Petronella wore a Dracula mask while trick-or-treating at the homes of drug dealers to identify people he thought he'd bought drugs from. Petronella wore false beards, wigs, makeup disguise himself while buying drugs. For several months in 1978, he portrayed a scruffy guy named Lou the Fence who bought several property and drug from criminals at a shabby storefront on Fillmore Avenue. My home was under the police watch for some time, Petronella recalled. Supposedly, two guys from New York City put out the contract, but they never found me. When Redford was in town filming The Natural in '83, makeup artist from the film disguised Petronella one day before he went out to make drug buys. The headlines more about the 1,000 drug arrests and convictions made Petronella a police hero. And in the 80s, he received many awards from local, state, and national law enforcement organizations. He never wanted his picture to be taken when he received those honors, except for the one time when he was photographed receiving an award while wearing a burlap bag over his head. The biggest honor of his 14-year undercover career came in January of '85, when then President Ronald Reagan invited him and 5 other private citizens to have lunch with the president at the White House. A few months later, Reagan had presented Petronella with a Deputy of the Year award at a national convention of sheriffs. Retiring from the sheriff's office in '86, Petronella worked another 30 years plus as a confidential criminal investigator at the DA's office. During all his years in law enforcement, he worked with friends and family members, including his late parents, Mary and Anthony, his wife, Julianne, and waitress Annie Grover, to help the Armory in business. The restaurant had a small eating area with several tables near the bar, featuring traditional checkerboard tablecloths and a huge banquet room in the back, where mandolin players would sometimes serenade dinners with Italian music. Dinners enjoyed steaming bowls of Mary Petronella's famous pasta, fagioli, and huge platters of pasta, red sauce, meatballs, and buffalo-made Italian sausage, Louis Coppola recalled. He added that the low prices were an additional attraction, and James Caan's film crew found out when he was filming Hide in Plain Sight in Buffalo. The movie producer, a guy from Hollywood, took 8 people to eat at the Armory, and they had a huge meal, Lee Coppola recalled. The waitress came over and gave him a check. He said, "No, I'm paying for the whole table, not just me." She said, "The bill is for the whole table." The guy couldn't believe it, and that's the way it was at the Armory. The place will be missed, Al Coppola said. M&T program helped bring Funville to life. Yolanda Funville worked for years as a registered nurse at Sisters Hospital, but it was always a dream to open her own business and run an entertainment center. As Fonville got closer to making a dream a reality a few years ago, she needed guidance and strategy and some additional money. She saved her money over the years and bolstered her bank account further by working as a traveling nurse after the COVID-19 pandemic, but finding a home for her business, fixing it up, then getting needed games and equipment would require an insurgence of funding. It wasn't until Fonville went through M&T Bank's Emerging Enterprisers program hosted by the University of Buffalo School of Management Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership 3 years ago that she was able to understand how to get what she needed to move ahead. Being an entrepreneur is difficult enough, so Fonville needed all the help and resources made available through the program, which she graduated from in 2023. That included building a relationship with M&T and borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars for the project. Without help, I wouldn't be here right now, said Fonville, who opened Funville, a play on her name, earlier this year at the former Hatchets and Hops at 68 Tonawanda Street in Buffalo's Black Rock neighborhood. I had no idea that what it takes to run a business, but that gave me the foundation and opened my eyes to a lot of things I needed, like more of a business plan and a business model, she said. The mentorship is great, and they even connect with you and even connect you with a banker because I was going to need way more than what I had saved. Funville features virtual adventures like a roller coaster, an immersive gaming arena, karaoke stage, and entertainment games, axe throwing with rubber axes, shuffleboard, and a multi-ball game with training and an array of sports. She built the business from scratch, starting with a photo booth she hauled to events on nights and weekends while working 12-hour overnight shifts at the hospital to make money to save. One of those photo booths is now located in her business. The M&T Bank Emerging Entrepreneurs Program is a 10-month program that helps socially or economically disadvantaged business owners to take their companies to the next stage of development. Since 2004, it helped more than 400 individuals trying to build their businesses. A new cohort of 40 will start in the fall across the all CEL programs, which began 4 decades ago. More than 1,700 alumni employ more than 23,000 Western New Yorkers, and their businesses are worth more than $2.3 billion to the local economy. Fonville, who has been with Catholic Health for the better part of 3 decades, has always loved entertaining. She hosts parties in haunted houses at her Grand Island home and used to create carnivals in her backyard. So at first, she was thinking big. Her ideas included bringing in bounce houses, bowling lanes, and a roller rink. But the program helped her understand that all of that might not be feasible at first. Fonville went from having a 7-figure idea to a more realistic 6-figure idea, said Shannon Johnson, who's banking relationship manager at M&T Bank, who served as a mentor in leadership roles at the CEL program. Her dream was years in the making, so from the time 3 years ago when we first met, she had an idea of what she wanted to do and had to pivot a bit from that. For the most part, she effectively made the dream come true, Johnson said. M&T is a significant supporter of CEL. It's funding for its programs, boots on the ground, and providing opportunities for those growing businesses to acquire small business loans or other forms of funding. That's where we come in to make sure it happens the way it should. Johnson said small businesses are the backbone of the community, so we want to make sure they're built and operating appropriately. Susan Stefan, an executive director of UB School of Management Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, said it's not always the most comfortable thing to be around bankers, but Johnson and other M&T representatives came across as approachable and friendly. It feels less intimidating, Stefan said. One of the things we love about our partnership with M&T is obviously the funding provided. The CEL keeps the cost of the program very minimal, but it's not just going to be writing a check. Shannon and others from M&T coming to provide financial training and business plans. Fonville finished the program and became a traveling nurse to make some bigger money and start to save for the business. She continues to work part-time at Sisters, even though she owns and runs the business. She reached out to Johnson as he helped her during her cohort of emerging entrepreneurial program. Fonville came to their first meeting with her vision board and a business plan and everything she learned from the program. She brought everything from the curriculum to the negotiating table with me, Johnson said. It always wasn't a smooth ride, but the two sides made it work. The funding is critical for many of the first-time business owners. We had a lot of obstacles. A lease that didn't work out, a government shutdown, and we did almost everything you can think of during that 2.5 years. We just worked together to get through it all. Fonville said her location is not far from first hoped. She's settling nicely after rebuilding much of the place and filled with axe throwing cages. We provide a deep pool of the program's alumni include Rebecca Brady, founder of Top Seeds, Artesian Cracker Company that won $1 million prize in 2021 and 43 North Startup Competition, Allison Dahani, founder and CEO of Buffalo Go Green and Urban Fruits and Veggies, Nicole Davis, whose fancy jewelry designs went from her kitchen to the shows at Paris Fashion Week and now cover European Vogue. Moving along now with asking Eric, stepson done with stepmom after father's death. Dear Eric, my parents divorced and my father remarried more than 20 years ago. My wife, our children, I would visit every year or two. The visits were cordial but fairly superficial, so I did not have a strong relationship with my father or his wife. My father passed away recently, and I have been dealing with his wife for the funeral arrangements and as the executor of the estate. I do not like spending time with his wife because she's very controlling and judgmental. When all of these tasks are completed, I do not want to stay in touch with her. If she does contact me in the future, how do I tell her I do not want to get together, or do I say something now? I don't want to be harsh, but I don't want her to be in my life. Dunn being stepson. Dear Dunn, I'm sorry for the loss of your father. Even though you weren't very close, this period surely brings up most of the difficult emotions. It's for that reason that I wouldn't advise having a conversation about severing ties with your father's wife now. It doesn't seem like a subject that needs to be broached at present and would likely cause unnecessary pain and conflict. Instead, if she reaches out in the future, you just set a clear boundary by declining her invitation. You should think about what kind of contact, if any, you'd be comfortable with. Are you okay with holiday cards? Can you just call in an emergency? Are you involved in some way in her end-of-life plan? Perhaps the answer to all those questions is no. That's fine. None of these are questions that have to be answered now, but thinking that's none of the questions, but thinking about them will get you internal clarity, and that clarity will help you set a better boundary. Dear Eric, neither my husband nor I have handyman skills. My husband has no interest in taking on Mr. Fix-It home repairs. We have sufficient income, however, whenever something relatively minor goes wrong, door locks need replacement, toilet flushing mechanism sometimes doesn't work, ceiling fan needs replacing, my husband comes up with a creative solution that fixes the problem. If you jiggle the toilet handle in a particular way, there's no problem. Depending on the seriousness of the problem, we lurch along the way for a few hours, days, and weeks, and then I say this isn't working and I'm calling a professional. At this point, he blows up and causes a scene. He gaslights me by telling me all is okay. I eventually call a professional while he's still protesting in the background. The person can come soon to the repair. He wants to put it off a few days or weeks. When the repair person comes, my husband is on good behavior and relieved once the repair has been done. What causes his high-level anxiety? And is there a way to avoid the unnecessary drama? It adds an extra layer of stress to the situation that I have to deal with on my own. We are retired. It has been going on for years. He was in therapy for many years and is unlikely to go back at his age. His anxieties about other issues have lessened, but they're as strong as ever. Once he was hospitalized for 2 weeks, I went ahead and got a few repairs done without mentioning it to him. He was glad to see the result. It was much less stressful on him and on me. Thanks for your help, Mrs. Fix-It. Dear Mrs. Fix-It, you have my sympathies. You not only do you have to fix household items when they break, but you also being asked to fix your husband's moods about the fixing. It's not fair that you have this burden and it's hurting your marriage. Your husband is making you responsible for something that he should be managing on his own. Perhaps he feels his pride is being dinged when someone else makes a repair and he can't. Perhaps that something else is happening. Either way, it's his job to look inside and deal with it. What he's doing instead is creating emotional damage to your relationship, and there needn't be ending before the next blow up. Have a frank conversation with him about the cycle that you're in. Tell him that it's harmful to you, that it's unnecessary. You might even show him this letter. Tell him that these are minor repairs, and yet his response is making them major issues. Ask him if he understands what you're saying, and ask him how he plans to address it on his own, because unlike the latch or the ceiling fan, this is something he can and must fix. You're listening to a reading of articles from today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. Time is 10:30. Comeback kids in sports. Let's take a look at the Sabres game in Montreal last night. Wow. Montreal, the comeback kids found at least one more comeback win within them now. The question becomes if Buffalo can find one more comeback to keep their season alive and continue their run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They did it Saturday night, a resurgence in front of a capacity crowd at Bell Center. The Sabres rallied from a 2-goal deficit against the Montreal Canadiens to earn an 8-3 win in Game 6 of their second-round series. Now the Sabres have forced a winner-take-all Game 7 at 7:30 p.m. Monday at the KeyBank Center. Now the Sabres will find out for certain they can earn the first Game 7 win since 1997. The Sabres that year earned the only Game 7 win in franchise history, a 3-2 overtime win against Ottawa to win a first-round series. This year, the team has to do it against the Canadiens in a series in which neither team has completely dictated the direction in which the series should go. The pendulum has swung back and forth, but neither the Canadiens nor Sabres kept a sure grip on the instrument. That's actually given the Sabres plenty of optimism as they prepare for the winner-take-all game Monday night. It's a 7-game series for a reason. Sabres forward Tage Thompson said, "It's a good team going up against each other. Any team can win in any given night, and that's why you have to have a short memory. You can't hold on to things and carry it into the next game. The winner of Game 7 will take on the Carolina Hurricanes in the Eastern Conference Final beginning Thursday in Lenovo Center in Raleigh, North Carolina, at a time to be determined. It will be the Sabres' first Game 7 since 2011 when the Philadelphia Flyers defeated them to win a first-round series in Philadelphia. Time for another first. For a lot of guys, it was the first elimination game we've been part of as a team, said Sabres goalie Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who replaced Alex Lyon midway through the first period with his team trailing 3-1. Duplicating what we did today, taking the good things away, knowing what we have to play and what our game is and the situations, being confident. I don't think it's anything too crazy to learn from today. The Canadians opened up the first 11 minutes of Saturday's game as quicker, crisper, and more precise squad. If one had to judge the first 11 minutes, the Canadians seemed poised to go in for the kill of the series. Sabres swapped Lyon, their Game 6 starter, for Luukkonen, a move that helped to revive the team. Jason Zucker cut the Canadiens' lead to 3-2 less than 6 minutes later, and the Sabres held the Canadiens to one shot on goal in the final 8:99 of the first period. I still say this. I think we played a hell of a first period, Coach Lindy Ruff said. We didn't win the score sheet battle. I think we played an even better second period for sure. I thought our skating in the offensive zone, we separated all the time. I thought we made really tough on the coverage. They couldn't quite catch up to the low rotation, some with the high rotation, then all of a sudden we had guys open. We need to skate. We need to skate on pucks. I thought this was a big difference in both zones for us. We skated, we took space and time away in the D zone. We skated away from people in the offensive zone. From there, the Sabres scored 3 goals in the second, taking advantage of the Canadiens' lack of sure-handedness and their inability to create opportunities around the Sabres' goal. Luukkonen didn't allow a goal in the 17 shots he faced. Arguably his biggest save came about 7 minutes into the period when the game was tied 3-3 after Zach Benson scored a minute into the period when he stopped Josh Anderson one-on-one. Swapping Lyon for Luukkonen was yet another change in the day of lineup changes. Ruff and his staff reconfigured his lines ahead of the elimination game, and it paid off quickly as Dowling gave the Sabres a 1-0 lead 32 seconds into the game. The Canadiens, though, answered three goals in the next 10 minutes. Arbor Jackow at 1:40 in the first, Ivan Demidov at 8:10, and Jake Evans' shorthanded goal at 10:14, which effectively chased Lyon. And the Canadiens had scored goals on 3 of their first 4 shots. But just after an elbowing penalty to defenseman Mike Matheson expired, Zucker cut the lead to 3-2 when he one-timed the shot past Montreal goalie Jacob Dobis. on his glove side, scoring on a pass from Josh Norris at 13:56. It became the first of 7 unanswered goals for the Sabres, including 2 by Jack Quinn. His first goal of the playoffs at 10:54 of the second on the power play with a one-timer from the left circle with Alexander Carrier penalized for interference, and his second power play goal at 9:58 of the third that made it a 6-3 and ended Dobas' night. Montreal pulled him in favor of Jacob Fowler. I felt like the whole series has been pretty much chaotic like that, said Quinn, whose last goal came April 9th in a 5-0 win against Columbus. A lot of the momentum shifts and lead changes, we knew we were playing well. And we even knew we were down 2. Even when we were down 2 after the first, we knew we could get back into it. Ruff said his team also gave each other some rated R encouragement as it prepared during the day for Game 6. We used this expression this morning, expressing JFG, and you can figure that out. Ruff said Riley. I told the team I'd rather they made a mistake going than not going. Some of the tentativeness in Game 5 really hurt us. The Sabres embraced their mentality, thwarted the Canadiens' chance to recapture the series of home ice, and put the Canadiens in a position to play their second Game 7 of the spring. Montreal defeated Tampa Bay in Game 7 on the first-round series to face the Sabres. After the shellacking at the hands of the Sabres in Game 6, Canadiens coach Martin St. Louis had to embrace one of his own model bounce forward. You have to further where you are, he said of the saying, physics. He made an attempt at humor. He and the Canadiens needed it after such a dismantling, but only one team can make the ultimate bounce in Game 7, and the Sabres gave themselves one more game to win to go into the playoffs or go home for the season. Now let's take a look at some NBA. Cunningham, Pistons force Game 7. Cade Cunningham scored 21 points and dished out 8 assists as the Detroit Pistons soundly beat the Cleveland Cavaliers 115-94 in Game 6 on Friday night, extending the Eastern Conference semifinal series to a decisive 7-game. Jalen Duren had 15 points and 11 rebounds. Paul Reed scored 17 points in 16 minutes. Ausar Thompson added 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 steals before falling out for the top-seeded Pistons. Great team win, Cunningham said. We finally are getting some synergy. We've got good players up and down the roster. It's just our will executing the game plan and just our will and aggression. Nobody wanting to lose. It takes everybody. Game 7 is set for Sunday in Detroit. James Harden had 23.7 rebounds and 8 turnovers for the 4th-seeded Cavaliers, who lost at home for the first time in 7 playoff games. Donovan Mitchell scored 18 points on 6 for 20 shooting. Evan Mobley added 18 points. Give them credit. Cavaliers coach Kenny Atkinson said of the Pistons, we weren't sharp, they were sharp. We got an opportunity. We've got an opportunity still. Game 7 is a toss-up, especially with 2 teams that are as evenly matched. We obviously got to play better. It starts there. And I see no heads down in our locker room. Now we've got to flip the narrative. Pistons lost 9 straight postseason games in Cleveland dating back to 2007. Detroit, which outscored the Cavaliers 61-43 in the second half, racked up 28 total points and 20 forced turnovers. I was pleased with the way we were able to play our style of basketball tonight, Pistons coach Jay Bickerstaff said. When we're at our best, it's defense and the physicality that carries us. Cunningham and Denise Jenkins each made 3-pointers, and Thompson had a resounding dunk as the Detroit built a 68-55 advantage with 3:10 in the third quarter. Marcus Sasser went coast to coast for a floater at the buzzer to push the Pistons gap to 84-70. The Pistons didn't let up in the fourth, sending most of the crowd home early on Jenkins' 3-pointer with 2:22 remaining and made it 112-91. Jenkins finished with 15 points, and Sasser scored 9 points in 18 minutes. Thompson was called for a flagrant foul on Sam Merrill, grabbing his neck and with both hands shoving him to the floor, and the Pistons leading 41-29 in the second. Merrill scored the next 5 points, fueling the Cavaliers to pull within 54-51 at halftime. Cunningham had 16 points, 5 assists, and 5 turnovers at intermission, while Duran posted his best half of the series with 9 points, 6 rebounds. We never really kicked it into the second level, Harden said. It was just never a consistent flow at either end of the floor, which is frustrating. Thompson made a few free throws to extend Detroit's advantage, 39-27, early in the second, capping a 22-4 run. The surge began when Sasser entered the contest. Karis LeVert made a pair of three-pointers off the bench in the first period for the Pistons, who led 27-25 after 12 minutes. Detroit converted 8 first-quarter turnovers by Cleveland into 9 points. Continuing along, let's take a look at golf. McNeely joins Smalley atop PGA Championship. Maverick McNeely joined overnight co-leader Alex Smalley at the top of the PGA Championship leaderboard on Friday as the American pair reached the halfway stage tier at 4 under par after a testing second round at a chilly, windswept Araminik Golf Club. McNeely, who has been the on-course leader at 5 under with 5 holes to play and later moved as low as 6 under, dropped shots late before finishing level with Smalley, who earlier carded a 1 under par 69 to set the club hole's target. The leaders were 1 shot clear of Hideki Matsuyama, Chris Goderup, Eldridge Pogiter, Stefan Jaeger, Minwoo Lee, Max Greiserman, who were grouped at 3 under, while defending championship and world number 1 Scotty Scheffler remained firmly in the mix at 2 under, 2 shots off the lead. Smalley, who started on the more difficult back 9, held the outright lead by 2 shots at one point before falling back with 3 consecutive bogeys after the turn. A lot of really good moments, some not so great, and then a lot of trying to keep moving forward in between, said Smalley. It was difficult. It was chilly in the morning. The wind was up. McNeely looked to set up and take control of the tournament when he reached 6 under, but late mistakes brought him back to the field, and he finished tied with Smalley at 4 under. He had a chance to take the solo halfway lead at the final hole, the par 5 ninth, but was unable to convert his birdie putt. I didn't feel like I played great. I somehow got a lot of my game, and this is obviously new territory for me, but I'm confident that it's going to go into the experience bank, and good or bad, I'm going to learn a lot from it, the American said. Former Masters champion Matsuyama carded his only bogey of the day at Araminik's par 4 6-hole when he failed to get up and down after the approach from the fairway zipped back off the front green. Scheffler, who had been off, Scheffler also went off the back 9, dropped out to the lead with bogeys on 3 and 4 holes as he struggled to find the fairways in the windy conditions while also dealing with tricky pin positions. He mixed a bogey with 3 birdies the rest of the way, including at the 9th, where he eagle attempted 3 feet from the cup and signed for a 1 over 71 that left him 2 under for the week. I feel like it's hard for me out there, and it's been hard for other players, Scheffler said. It was pretty obviously to tell this morning the conditions were pretty rough, so I just kept trying to remind myself that. Martin Kamer, who won the PGA Championship and joined Live Golf Tournament in 2022, quickly fell off after 5 bogeys in his first 7 holes en route to 75. The German, 1 of 7 overnight co-leader, slipped to 2 over for the championship. Ro Haisatuni soon slipped back from his overnight share of the lead. Masters champion Rory McIlroy, whose opening 74 left him in danger of missing the cut. He recovered on Friday to move safely through the weekend at 1 over par. McIlroy made early progress with birdies in the 2nd and 4th and added another in the 12th, but was unable to get back at level par after missing a birdie chance at the par 5 16th. Still, his second round recovery was enough to leave him inside the cut line. I think this afternoon I had a better understanding of how the course is playing. I think knowing that the field isn't going to get away from you, that can be a little bit more patient, especially this afternoon, said the Northern Irishman. John Rahm, who also advanced through the weekend and remained on the fringes of the contentions at 1 under, 3 shots off the lead. The Spaniard briefly reached 3 under after a birdie on the 11th, but the bogeys at the 13th and 15th checkered his momentum. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from today's Buffalo News. Time is 45 minutes after the hour. Which franchise legend should be honored? Mailbag by Jay Skursky. Welcome to this week's mailbag. James asks, when the Bills decide how their Wall of Fame players will be honored in the new stadium, what former Bills should be next to be recognized? Good question, Jay. Good question. There is a backlog of worthy candidates at this point, given that the last player named to the Wall of Fame was Cookie Gilchrist in 2017. I'd go with defensive tackle Kyle Williams as one of the next to be honored. But a case could be made for Butch Bird, Eric Moulds, or Cornelius Bennett. Jeff asks, the Minnesota Vikings have requested to interview Terrence Gray, the Bills' assistant GM, for their general manager vacancy. If he leaves, what does it mean for the Bills, besides, of course, having to replace him? The Bills have 2 assistant general managers, Gray and Brian Gaine. So it's not as if Brandon Beane will be left all alone should Gray get the Vikings job. The Bills have an experienced front office working for Beane. If Gray does leave, it could see Malik Boyd, the team's senior director of pro personnel, being a logical promotion candidate. Boyd is interviewed around the league for GM openings as well and is well versed in how the Bills do business. At least for this season, I'd expect the team would handle Gray's departure with in-house promotions. Brad from Amherst asks, one of the many reasons given for keeping Brandon Beane was that the Bills would not fire him right before the draft, given all the preparation that was completed. Does that mean if Tarek Pagula concludes after this season that he has had enough of Beane's roster mismanagement that he won't make a move after the 2027 draft? Excellent question, Brad. That would be quite a change of heart by Pagula after promoting Beane in January, but the Bills owner is not exactly predictable when it comes to what he'll do with his executives. The Vikings fired their general manager in January, so it's not as if teams can't do it at the end of the seasons. But to your point, though, Beane and his scouting staff at that point will be deep into preparations for the 2027 draft. Nevertheless, it's time. The time to do it, in my opinion, would have been right after the season. Of course, that opens up another question, starting with the future of head coach Joe Brady. Does he stay with that scenario? Would the Bills officially reset their head coach and general manager? The 2026 season would have been an unmitigated disaster for that to be the case. Jerry asks, just wondering your feelings on Matt Milano, Shaq Thompson, and Tre'Davious White. All of these players were on last year's team. I believe all 3 are valued backups. All 3 have played well in their roles. Milano at times seems like his old self. Has there been any word from these players about contracting with the Bills? We'll start with the last question first. Jermaine Burton participated in last week's rookie minicamp on a tryout basis, but to this point was not offered a contract. It seems the Bills decided to take a look, but have decided not to sign Burton, at least for now. Doing so would require releasing someone else from the roster, which is a move the team clearly isn't ready to make. Burton didn't have much to say when he spoke to the media about what went wrong with the Bengals. I'd like to think he had a better explanation when talking to the Bills about the situation there for 3 former Bills. You mentioned I've written a couple of times this offseason that re-signing White and Thompson would be a priority of mine. I agree with your assessment, Jerry. They played well last season. When called upon, it's possible new defensive coordinator Jim Leonard does not see them as a good fit in his scheme, which would explain why they have not re-signed. Alternatively, Thompson and White could be asking for more money than Beane's willing to pay. Whatever the case, I'd still be in favor of those 2 players coming back. As for Milano, who'll go down as one of the greats in the Sean McDermott era, I'm fine with turning the page. Bills' schedule, predictions, superlatives, and teams to watch for 2026. We knew the opponents. Now we know the dates, times, and broadcast details. The release of the NFL's 2026 season has brought a few surprises for the Buffalo Bills. It's fun to see the picture, though, We see how many days are between games, back-to-back games. West Coast is an interesting wrinkle for Joe Brady to navigate during his first season as head coach. There are 6 games in prime time and 2 on holidays. So much can change between now and week 1, let alone week 18. Injuries can turn a potential contender into a pretender. But the uncertainty shouldn't stop us from making predictions. What fun is the schedule and the schedule release if you don't look at games and move on. Here are some of my predictions and superlatives for another Bills season with Super Bowl expectations. Easiest stretch, weeks 9 through 11, is the closest the Bills will come to an easy stretch. It's too soon to know whether their opponent in week 9, Minnesota Vikings, will be better with Kyler Murray at quarterback. They still do have a general manager. The game is on the road. They still don't have a general manager. The game's on the road on Monday Night Football, and the timing gives the Bills an extra day to prepare. Buffalo faces the Jets and Dolphins in weeks 10 and 11, respectively. Most difficult stretch, weeks 1 to 5. The Bills face the Texans, Lions, Chargers, Patriots, and Rams. Nobody should be surprised if each of those 5 teams makes the playoffs. The Chargers are a sleeper team to watch in the AFC because their offensive tackles are going to be healthy, and the upgraded offensive coordinator by hiring former Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel. 3 other games are at home, but the Bills have a new coach and a new stadium, and we don't know how this team will play in the new Highmark Stadium. Most intriguing game, the Broncos in Denver on Christmas. It's a rematch of the Bills lost in the AFC divisional round. Jim Leonard, their defensive coordinator, will face his former team. Now we have to see how the defense fares against the Broncos compared to the one coached by Sean McDermott. First win, week 1. Yes, the Bills have not won in Houston with Allen as their quarterback. They haven't gotten a win there since November of 2006 when Lee Evans caught 2 83-yard touchdown passes from J.P. Lossman. The Texans' defense in 2026 is expected to be the best in the NFL. It may even be better as one that sacked Allen 8 times. C.J. Stroud, the Houston quarterback, is expected did not play the game. The unknown will help the Bills win, though. The Texans are not going to know what to expect from the Bills' defense. Leonard is only going to use basic looks during preseason. Houston will have to go off video from the Broncos' defense in 2025. Be a close game, but the Bills will return home with a 1-0 record. First touchdown of the new stadium, Allen on a quarterback sneak at the goal line. It would be perfect, right? Celebrity guest at the home opener. How about the Buffalo Sabres? Who knows what their team will look like in 2026. Alex Tuck is a pending unrestricted free agent. General manager Jarmo Kekalainen will make changes this summer to put his stamp on the roster, but the Bills are going to recognize the Sabres for their playoff run. First snow game, the Chiefs on Thanksgiving. We're not going to count a few snowflakes. We may see those 1 week prior when the Dolphins are in Orchard Park for 1 p.m. kickoff. The first real snowfall will happen on Thanksgiving night when the Bills facing Patrick Mahomes. Sneaky opponent. The Bills are going to beat the Raiders in week 6, but it may not be a blowout you'd expect. To the Raiders' credit, they had hired an intriguing coach, Clint Kubiak, and signed a veteran quarterback, Kirk Cousins, to stabilize the franchise until number 1 pick Fernando Mendoza is ready to start. The defense should be respectable, especially early in the season when injuries have not depleted their depth. Overrated opponent, the Bears. Maybe it's the players they lost on defense. Maybe it's the offensive line or bouts with inconsistency from Caleb Williams, the quarterback. It's just difficult for me to consider them a shoo-in for the playoffs. The Bills will get to Williams in week 15 by changing the picture after the snap and dialing up some exotic blitzes. Head-scratching decision. At a time when social media is filled with people complaining, it's refreshing to see this week how so many Bills fans embrace the team's decision to place the home opener on a Thursday night. But is the timing ideal? Absolutely not. Out-of-town fans will need to make additional time to take off from work. It's deserved to be an all-day party on Abbott Road. The atmosphere will be electric, and the NFL sort of made up to the Bills by handing them home games that will start at 1 p.m. Still, we'd rather have them seen this played on a Sunday night. Let's take a look at the scoreboard now. And Stanley Cup playoffs, second round. Carolina defeated Philadelphia 4-0. Montreal and Buffalo 3 games apiece as the Sabres topped the Canadiens 8-3. Montreal had jumped off to a 3-1 lead. Sabres scored 7 unanswered goals to force a Game 7 Monday night at the arena in Buffalo at 7:30 p.m. Western Conference Final, Colorado defeated Minnesota 4-0. And Vegas defeated Anaheim 4-2. So Colorado will face the Golden Knights in the conference final. In the NBA playoffs, Eastern Conference, Detroit and Cleveland are tied 3 games apiece. They have a 7th and deciding game at Detroit at 8 p.m. New York defeated Philadelphia 4-0. In the Western Conference, Oklahoma City defeated the Lakers 4-0. San Antonio beat Minnesota 4-2. Conference Finals, New York at Detroit or Cleveland will be on Tuesday at Detroit or New York. Western Conference, Oklahoma City will be playing San Antonio Monday at Oklahoma City at 8:30 p.m. Let's look at baseball scores from around the league. Diamondbacks beat the Rockies 9-1. Cardinals beat the Royals 5-4. The Padres beat the Mariners 2-0. Athletics topped the Giants 5-2. And the Dodgers beat the Angels 6-0. The International League let's look at Friday. St. Paul beat Columbus 8-5 and 5-3 in a doubleheader. Buffalo beat Worcester 5-2. Syracuse beat Scranton 8-2. Rochester topped Lehigh 3-2. Charlotte topped Norfolk 4-1. Gwinnett topped Durham 9-2. Indianapolis topped Louisville 11-5. Nashville 4. Iowa 3. Toledo topped Omaha 4-2, and Memphis topped Jacksonville 7-5. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, May 17th. We read from the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcasted at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your reader today has been Ron Bickelman. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that at noon is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability